Shalom. All praise is due to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Recha Kodash. The bonus to the elect apostle, bishops, elders at Great Millstone, ever well. Shalom to like God out there doing this work in sincerity and truth and not for vainglory in season out of season. To the few sisters that listen to the apostle, bishops, elders, and brothers, shalom to you too, the elect of the nation of Israel, which are the elect of you so-called Negroes, West Indian Haitians, Hispanics, Latinos, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, spread out through the four corners of the earth and the Americas. Okay, this is Manifest Destiny. It says Manifest Destiny was a 19th century American belief by the so-called white man, okay, that the United States was divinely ordained to expand across the North American continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific. You know, from the Atlantic on the East Coast and the Pacific on the West Coast. Now, to a certain extent, they're right, because when you go to the book of Job, the 9th chapter and the 24th verse, it says the earth was given into the hand of the wicked. Who's the wicked? The so-called white man. Okay. All right. He took the land from its rightful owners, which were the so-called Native American, Seminole Indians, and Latino and Hispanic Native American Indians, okay, as they would like to call them, you know, and they did it in a wicked way, okay. You know, when you had Christopher Columbus, when he came over to the Hispanic and the Latino tribes, okay, all right, indigenous tribes, what did he do? You know, he put them in slavery, stole their riches. He brutally killed them off, man. Well, I should say murdered them off. Tortured them. Okay? You know, so-called Mexicans, Pizarro, you know, and you know, what did the so-called white man do from England? Okay, the British. Okay, what did they do here in America? They brutally murdered the North American Indians and the Seminole Indians and took their land and put them in slavery and took their riches. You know, so in a sense, yeah. But what the so-called white man does not want to admit is that goes both ways. So we got some Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai got some manifest destiny for your ass too. All right, so-called white man. Okay, here in America and all over the world, in Europe, all over the world, wherever so-called white people would be. Okay. So let's just read the scripture. Okay, let's go to Ezekiel 25th chapter and the 14th verse. All right. '25th chapter and the 14th verse. And everybody in the know knows these scriptures. You know, even the elite so-called white people know these scriptures. Okay. All right, so let's go here. Let's start at the 12th verse. Ezekiel, the 25th chapter and the 12th verse. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because that Edom hath dealt against the house of Judah, which is a so-called black man, the African American, as you would call him, okay, Edom is who? So-called white man, which is the true red man, by the way. The so-called white man is the true red man. I know he put that on the tribe of Gad, which are you North American Indians, okay? But the word Edom itself comes from the Hebrew Adawam, which means what? Red. Because he has no melanin in his skin. His blood shows forth through his skin. Have dealt against the house of Judah, so-called African American man, by taking vengeance. You know, and they took vengeance on who? On the so-called black man by bringing him over here, and the black woman by bringing him over here in cargo slave ships and making them work for free and torturing them and murdering them. Okay? All you got to do is go on YouTube. They got all kinds of channels of what the so-called white man did to the so-called African American man and woman and sons and daughters. Okay? All right? Okay? Because at one time when you go into the Bible and in history, King David was ruling over so-called white people. You had other kings that, and King David was from the tribe of Judah. In the Hebrew, Yahwadah, which was a so-called black man, African-American man. Okay? All right? You know, and then, and other kings, all right, and of Israel, which are Negroes, West Indian, and Haitians. So-called Negroes, West Indian, and Haitians. And during the Dark and Middle Ages, the so-called black man was ruling in Europe. Yes, the African-American man and woman was ruling in Europe. Yeah, England, Germany, France, Spain. Okay, all of Europe. The Vikings were so-called black men, African-American men and African-American women. Okay, that's the history. Okay. So during the Dark and Middle Ages, they had the so-called white man in slavery. Okay. All right. It says, thus saith the Lord power, Yahweh, because that Edom hath dealt against the house of Judah by taking vengeance and hath greatly offended and revenged himself upon them. Yeah, because look what's happening now, man. You know, you can just say, oh, yeah, that was slavery. That was, man, listen, that was in the 16, 17, 1800s. Look, during the 60s, they were hanging so-called black men and black women. What are you talking about, man? Okay, you got people you got so-called African Americans that's still living today that was born in the 60s, man. Okay? That was living in the 60s and seeing this happening. And it just wasn't in the South, man. It was in New York City, too. It was in the Midwest. Okay? It was in the West. Okay? All right? Okay? Because what made Wall Street? Slaves being brought over. Okay? So-called African-American slaves being brought over to New York. That's what started Wall Street off, man. Okay? And man, New York got all kind of stories about how you had so-called white mobs going throughout murdering so-called African-American men, women, and sons and daughters. All right? Children, if that's what you like to say. All right? All throughout the Midwest, all throughout all of America, man. Not just the Deep South. All right? That's how they took their revenge. Okay? And let's go down to the 14th verse. And I will lay my vengeance upon Edom. Uh-oh. That's what Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai is going to do. By the hand of my people Israel, which are so-called Negroes, West Indian, Haitians, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, the nation of Israel. And they shall do in Edom according to mine anger and according to my fury. And they shall know my vengeance, saith the Lord Yahweh. The power Yahweh. Okay? So that's a manifest destiny for you. Edom, Esau, okay, which is the so-called white man. Hope you've been edified. And with that, Shalom. It's coming very soon. Rejoice, the elect of the nation of Israel. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai is going to get his vengeance on them for touching you, for putting you in slavery. Shalom.